some things that to go over application-wise and what can happen with the valves. In applications involving with these particular valves, again, because the internal parts are all the same, really what we're looking at and relating it to always has to do with what the flow through the valve is. And I'll be honest with you, for the most part, backwash filter valves, there's not a whole lot going on. All we're doing is backwashing and rinsing, so a lot of times troubleshooting backwash filter valves really relates to whether the valve's leaking and where the valve's leaking to. On softener valves with the brining system, there's a whole lot more steps that often are related to, because if the water's not being softened, or if the injectors and the brining system isn't working and doing the appropriate things, you have to go through troubleshooting steps that I'm going to go through in a little bit. So with leaking, or the operation of the Fleck valve, all of our valves are piston operated valves. And the piston is a brass Teflon coated piston. And that brass Teflon coated piston operates into a stack of seals and spacers. And those seals and spacers are the wear items inside the valve. Those are going to be the replaceable items most of the time in any of the services of these valves. We're going to go through some troubleshooting things and things that are related to the inside of the valve, but the seals and spacers on the inside of the valve really are the parts that are replaced most often. Anytime any of these seals' integrity is broken, if they're leaking from one port to another, you're going to have a valve that's improperly working. Any of the seals that go around the drain port, we have two seals that go around the drain port. If you have any leaks to drain, that would be an indication that there's an internal leak on seals and spacers. The way that these valves are ported, whether it's a 2510 or if it's a 2850, they're ported the same. The last two ports in the back are your injector ports. So you have the inlet port for your injector that goes up to the screen side, and then you have your brining side or your injector port, the next one up. The third one in the middle is the drain port. Next one up is top of tank, where the distributor tube comes up. That's where your product water is coming. And then your last port up in the front is your outlet side. That's the same with any of our single piston valves, whether it's a 2510, 2750, 2850, all the way up to the 3150. So with that in mind, knowing what those flow patterns are, you'll be able to know what seals, depending upon what's happening with the valve, you need to look at when you're taking out of the valve.